Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, Reaching Success and Connection, Peer Support Integration in the Workplace. I would like to share with all of you that this webinar will be also offered in Spanish. And my name is Erika Rubalcaba Heredia. I will be the moderator for today. This webinar was developed in part under grant number SM062560 from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, CMHS, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, HHS. This webinar will be recorded and the recording will be posted to the National Empowerment website, which is power2u.org. And if you don't wish to be seen on the recording, you are welcome to turn off your camera. We also have closed captioning, and you can always click on CC or more to view closed captioning. You can also view the entire transcript of the meeting by clicking on Show Transcript. Towards the end of the webinar, we will have some time for Q&A session, and you are invited to ask questions at any time through the chat function. We will do our best to answer all questions, and you will also have a chance to raise your Zoom hand to speak. If we don't answer your questions, you are welcome to email us to info@power2u.org. And we will do our best to get back to you. You are also welcome to make comments using the chat function. And now I would like to introduce to Juan Velez Cort. He currently works as mental health and peer recovery consultant for the Mental Health and Anti-Addiction Services Administration of Puerto Rico, and also provides consulting for the National Empowerment Center. He is also a former consultant for the BRSS TACS Technical Assistance Center. Among other roles, he works as a liaison to bridge the gap between peer and clinical services, facilitating and coordinating trainings, workshops, and strategic opportunities to integrate people with lived experience in the workplace and maintain the integrity of role of peer services. Other activities performed include workshops at alternative conferences for the Latino population in California through state efforts and extensive experience in system of care, and working with children, adolescents, and their families through support groups and other activities. His journey into these roles began through his own lived experience, overcoming multiple challenges which led to his involvement in advocacy efforts. Velez looks to incorporate audiovisual media as a modern resource to engage people in creative discussions about mental health and wellness. Currently a resource for ECPR initiatives, he remains inspired and hopeful to create new opportunities to engage youth and young adults in efforts that promote their wellness and motivate them toward their goals. I will now turn it over to Juan. Thank you all for being here.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me? And thank you so much, Erica. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I want to make sure that we know that this is a safe space. We want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, so you can engage in the chat freely. You can share where you're from, how are you feeling today? The idea is that to integrate what we do. You know, peer work is amazing. Peer work is beautiful. We know it has its challenges. We know it has its opportunities. And as it's stated here, the goal with all of this is to make sure that peer support is valued. Peer support is on the table. Peer support is something that we work on an international scale, right? That being said, we still have our challenges, but we're here to not focus on the problem. We're here to focus on what can we do together to achieve all of that. So that's why I'm very, very happy to see everybody here, and we'll get to know each other throughout this effort. And obviously, thank you so much for SAMHSA for the funding opportunities, and thank you to the National Empowerment Center for which I consult for being able to hang out with all of you awesome people. So before we begin with the formal presentation, I want to make sure we simply get to know each other. So I would love to know 3 little things in chat, if you will, and Erica can also engage as we go on, which is share your state, which many of you lovely people are already doing. What's your favorite food or what motivates you? Part of connecting is knowing where I'm at, but also knowing what I like, what makes me happy, what brings a smile to my face. As Erica mentioned, I am from and live in Puerto Rico. I've lived here my whole life. From the food to the culture, I just love where I am. I've been working with NEC for multiple years. My first time engaging with people from NEC was at an alternatives conference over 10 years ago, where I saw somebody named Oryx presenting some amazing things. And nowadays we work together, right? So I think it shows you that despite how large and huge this world is, we're still in this little capsule, working towards the same goals. I've worked in peer support and mental health efforts for seemingly all my life. For context, I'm 34, so some people may refer to me as young, but I remember my first time speaking about all this, I was 14. So I've technically been doing this for 20 years, and then professionally just over 10 with the Puerto Rico government, with SAMHSA, with different places. And thank you for shouting out ice cream and lasagna. What's your favorite food, Erica? I'm going to put you on the spot.
My favorite food is enchiladas.
Oh,
Yes.
I haven't had a good enchilada in a while. We have some great Mexican food in Puerto Rico from Mexicans that, especially post-pandemic, they moved to Puerto Rico, and it is delicious. Something else that I did, I actually founded the first peer run program in Puerto Rico within the actual government structure. A lot of that actually is what directly motivated me to work on this little workshop, because it's everything, right? You see the beautiful opportunities, but you also witness some of the things that we can change as a system. I'm motivated by food, coffee, a lovely conversation. Can't wait to have one tomorrow with a great friend. Coffee is what motivates me. I already have my cup, for those wondering. I wish I had a little bit more. And this year I celebrate 10 years with my wife, and I have 2 cats that they are the real owners of this home. I just happen to pay it alongside my wife. And I think anybody that's an animal lover pretty much agrees we work for them, right? That's pretty much what it's all about. So as we continue connecting, I just want to share this quick image and ask, for those in chat, what's happening here? We see 2 individuals, right? We see something being built. We see a structure that is yet unfinished, right? It is in progress. And that beam, I mean, I don't know about you, Erica, but there's no way I could lift that beam by myself, right? Ideally, maybe if I did a couple more workouts, that could happen. And if somebody writes in chat, support, right? And in my case, maybe once that beam is up, the house can sustain itself, right? It's about maintaining. It's about ensuring that that house continues to be there. But there is that one point in time where you need an architect. You need people to physically purchase the materials. You need people to physically put up the materials. You need people with knowledge. And maybe you're an expert of one, but we can't all do it at the same time, right? Because every person does their thing the best. And I see one thing in chat is the word teamwork, right, Erica?
Yes, we have teamwork, stronger together, support.
And it also lets us know that it's okay that I don't have to do everything. I'd rather be the person that I know the best people that can do the best type of thing, and I can connect those. But I don't like having the pressure of it's like, oh, Juan's got to build it, Juan's got to paint it, Juan's got to do all that. No, it's like I got awesome people for that. I'll do my thing to the best of my abilities. And the same thing can be said about peer support, right? Because we all have our special role, and we also have that thing that gives us the butterflies about our work, right? We're all motivated by one thing in particular. I know Erica does a lot of ECPR training, and I can only believe how much that fulfills you, right?
Sure.
Exactly.
I just want to share with all of you that it has been such a great experience, you know. And what we all have in common is that we have a heart to help our community. So thank you.
Absolutely. And that's the most beautiful thing. So I wanted to share this quote that I think is very, very powerful and I resonated with. I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they can derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. That comes to us from an author that she specializes in multiple topics, somewhat associated with what we're doing. But I think the most beautiful thing of pure work is it's not what I can do, it's not what I can give, it's also what I can receive, right? That in its essence is mutuality. This is not a one-sided street. So whenever we do our work, some people may see us as the expert because we've been in recovery for 10, 15, 30 years, however it may be. But I don't know about you. I'm still learning every day. I'm still learning how I can do things better. There's somebody that maybe I'm supporting and I get something great out of them. And I see a question in chat about what ECPR is. ECPR is something we're actually going to talk about briefly today. It's an excellent practice that the National Empowerment Center has implemented, where, as Erica said, you can engage in heart-to-heart conversations with a judgment-free mindset. Often we wear many hats, right? And we feel like we have to represent this when we represent a human being. We represent somebody with emotions. I can be a parent, but I can also be a coworker. I can also be a brother. I can also be a son, right? And how do we juggle all of that to be able to connect without that judgment? And we also have some more information in chat. So now that brings us to this basic yet powerful question of why do we do what we do? At some point, all of us, we had or have had or are currently having our road to recovery from whatever it may be. It could be mental health, trauma, substance use, whatever it may be, right? But at some point, we said, you know what? I think I'm good enough that I want to give back. I think I'm proud enough with what I've achieved that I think I can actually inspire somebody else. I think I can actually contribute to another person's life. And that in itself is beautiful. But we choose it, right? We choose to say, now this is a new chapter in my life. What are some of the responses, Erica, in chat, if available?
Sure. We have to give back. It is my true purpose in life. Um, to mitigate suffering.
Thank you for that.
And
I remember when I first spoke in public about my lived experience with anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder, depression. I was 14, like I mentioned. Never did I think I want to be an advocate. I want to be a peer. I'm 14, right? I don't know these words. But when I was hospitalized the first time, I said, I'm not alone. Other people are going through what I'm going through. But then I would see me getting better at some things, worse at others. And I said, maybe I can talk about that. And I started talking at 14 to different parents because I would see their kids suffering because the parents would say, this is just a phase, it'll go by. I'm in Latino culture, and Erica can also talk about this, right? It's like we don't talk about mental health. It's very stigmatized, especially within our community. So I said, as a young Latino male, I want to talk about what's in my head. simply so other people know that you're not alone. But I chose that. At some point in my life, all of us could have said, you know what? I've helped, but I'm good. But there's something that makes us thrive, that makes us really want to be able to connect with others, right? I think we got another response.
Yes, so we have to help thrive, not just survive. And the other one is my purpose is to teach workforce to learn about leading trauma-informed best practices.
That is excellent, and congratulations to everybody. And continue, sharing in chat. That's what it's all about. And what's on the menu today? We're going to be here for, a little less than an hour 30 now. Just so you have an idea, everything that I'm sharing today is part of an about 4-hour workshop that we currently have available for organizations. So if at any point you'd like us to connect with all of you and explore possibilities for you, your organization, this is something that we do in a much more relaxed environment. You can reach out. The information is going to be at the end. We also have people from NEC in chat that can greatly just write down your information or anything. And there's going to be some more housekeeping towards the end. But the first thing is, why was this developed, right? At some point, I proposed this idea just based on some opportunities that had come up through SAMHSA, through NEC. And 2 years ago, if we're talking about mutuality and all of you have shared a little bit about you, I think it's only fair I share a little bit about me, right? So the main thing that inspired me to do the work I'm doing today, not just pure work, but specifically this, 2 years ago, I thought I was going to get a heart attack after a meeting where for weeks I felt discriminated after working in a place for over 9 years. And I'll never forget when I had to stand up and I had to share about why the words that you're telling me are harmful to me, why the things that you're doing are damaging not just me, because it's not about me. It was about my staff. It was about my colleagues, and how those that maybe don't have lived experience don't understand all the challenges that we go through literally to just wake up. And if anybody resonates with that, I would love to know in the chat, right? Because I've had wonderful days where I'm like, hey, I'm 100%. But I've had other days where I'm like, this is hard work because you're balancing your own recovery, the person that you're helping with their recovery, but then you're managing the system, a system that doesn't necessarily understand the peer role. I know I'm not the only one that most people think a peer is just somebody that shares their life story. And I'm like, there's so much more to that. There's best practices. We talk about trauma. We share all of these different strategies. We walk the walk. We talk the talk. We try to model. We also try to motivate and find that motivation internally. And when you're in a meeting and you're like, I have never felt so alone, yet I'm surrounded by so many people. And at that point, I said, I'm either done. I got home and I told my wife, I think I'm done. I think in a post-pandemic world, peer support for me is going to be a chapter that is part of my past. I'm grateful. But then I said, not everybody has the privilege to say, hey, I'm going to take a stop. So I said, what if it's time for a new challenge? What if it's time to have a different conversation that's not just what is peer support, but how do we integrate peer support in environments that may not necessarily talk about all this, that may not necessarily know about recovery? So I don't know if there's anything you want to bring up, Erica, from the comments before I keep going.
Yes, we have people who totally relate with you. Um, and I have a comment that from someone who recently lost a job because, oops, couldn't share openly with meetings what was going on with him. And he felt a stranger in a strange land every day.
Thank you for sharing that. And it's unfortunate, right? Our work is so beautiful. We directly change systems to see people as people and not a diagnosis, right? Yet that doesn't make it any better for us. We're kind of in the middle. We're in the middle of that sandwich, right? And we're going to be talking about all that, but just wanted to give you a basic overview of what's on the menu for today. So what can we achieve together, not just today, but also the availability of the workshop that we do have? First of all, rekindle our initial interest for wanting to become a peer supporter. So many times we get so overworked. Burnout is a thing that applies not just for peer work, it involves clinical work. I collaborate with social workers, substance use counselors, and everybody at some point says, like, I love this, but there's a D, right? I loved, because so many things happen that our heart almost like tries to separate itself from the work that we do because it is so divided sometimes. Explore how comfortable we feel engaging with non-peer staff. I've had many experiences supervising programs and providing consulting for programs that they have clinical staff that have been working for many years together. All of a sudden, they get a grant opportunity. So what happens when they hire peer staff, but the lingo, the language is embedded in a clinical environment, right? And then that person feels excluded. But then the other side says, well, Juan never talks. And it's like, if we're integrating somebody, integration isn't just there's a chair, go and sit in it. It's what are all of the implications when it comes to hiring somebody? So when they sit in that chair, they say, I belong in this chair. How many of us have had experiences where they give us a place to sit, but we don't feel like we belong, right? How can we create that healthy connection with other staff? Sometimes because of our lived experience, I don't know about you, but I only really knew how to talk about my recovery from psychiatric to psychological environments to what I was doing for well-being. But then I'm working with people that have never really talked about all that because they've not experienced it. And I learned to talk about movies. What's your favorite food? Where do you want to go on vacation? And I'm going to share why all of that is so essential in this process. Further explore the topics of boundaries, often discussed in peer support trainings. I think all of us at some point struggle with boundaries, right? Because we often come from segregated environments. We come from places where we were being told what to do. So we become the professionals that we are. But then even then, right, there's a boundary of like, do I share my number? When can somebody call me? How much do I share with my coworker? How much of my personal life do I share on social media? And you're like, it's Monday, people. It's like, can we like relax? Like sometimes we start the week. I know it's on a Wednesday, by the way. I do know the day, but hypothetically, it's a Monday, right? And you're like, I got all these thoughts and I gotta get to work. Let's also have an honest conversation with ourselves about the fears and concerns of being part of a work environment. I don't know about you, but at my worst in my recovery, I was great at hanging out with myself. I knew what I liked to eat. If I wanted to sleep all day, I could. If I didn't want to sleep all day. But when you're part of a work environment, it's my culture and your culture, and you celebrate this holiday. I don't necessarily celebrate it. We're working together, and I'm spending more time with you than I am with my family, right? And how do we coexist when I'm still figuring out maybe who I truly am? Explore how our story continues to change as we evolve and continue that. Like I mentioned 2 years ago, I never thought I would ever get to lead a program, let alone develop a program that has created jobs, that has worked on public policy. And I don't say that with any intention of saying, look at what Juan has done. It's, I shouldn't even be alive if I go by my story. I was the one that was an irrelevant member of society. And then to have the local government say, I trust you despite your past to build something is something that it's like today it was with me, tomorrow it's with you, and it's with another person. And explore the concepts of constructive criticism and supervision that I know can many times be a little bit awkward and uncomfortable when it's like we can do things, but we can do them a little better, maybe, right? Erica, do we have any additional comments from what we've been discussing so far?
Yes, we have a couple of comments with some, let's see. So I have one. It feels dividing, learning how to adapt to circumstances while also trying to stand against system of harm.
And it's difficult, right? I remember when what was happening to me 2 years ago, shortly after there was a federal review, and I'm very upfront, I'm very real, and I shared how I was feeling. And somebody told me something that I just felt so relieved. It didn't solve anything, but it made me say, "Oh, right," which was, we can't both be the person experiencing the problem, but then it's also up to me to come up with the solution, right? Because you're like, here you are spraying the water hose at me while also telling me turn off the water hose. It's like, okay, come on, you got to make up your mind, right? And because we feel like we're drowning because the problem's there, but I also got to come up with the solution while I'm still experiencing the problem. And this is where this topic from this afternoon comes in, because it's how can we explore some possible solutions? And here's another quote that I love. Sometimes reaching out and taking someone's hand is the beginning of a journey. At other times, it is allowing another to take yours. I think with the work that we do, the first part is the most expected part, right? Somebody's coming to me because they want me to support them. But how challenging can it sometimes be with us today? Not 2 days ago, but today, to say, you know what? Here's my hand. I could use some TLC. I could use some support. Is that something that is accessible to you? Do you feel comfortable saying, you know what? Today, I need a little love in my life. Today, I need somebody to carry me because I'm a human being. I'm not perfect. And I don't know about you, but it's happened to me a lot. I don't know if you've experienced something at some point in your life, Erica, where you've just said, you know what? People see me as the professional, they see me as the trainer, but I could also have my bad days as well.
Yes, I mean, that's very true. Sometimes we are in this role that other people see us as the experts, that as the people who might not have any problems. But sometimes, as you mentioned, Juan, we do have our own problems at home, and that's part of our life, and it's okay to not be okay.
And what you're saying is very powerful, because sometimes, because of our peer role or because of our current responsibilities, people hold us in very high regard. I know I'm not the only person where sometimes somebody says, I want to be like you with this, or you seem so calm with that. And I'm like, if you talked to me 15 minutes ago, maybe you wouldn't think that, right? But it goes to show how much we've grown, that what we perceive as I'm anxious, I'm unprepared, another person can say, like, if that is being unprepared, sign me up, right? Because we continue evolving over time. Now, this is the question for me, and maybe the biggest inspiration, and the thing that I ask myself almost every day, which is, how important is providing peer support for my recovery, for your recovery? And I would love to know, with anybody that is a trainer, anybody that is providing peer work, how important is supporting another for you? I remember when I first started my journey providing peer support, a good amount of the motivation behind that was, well, people tell me I have all these skill sets. I don't necessarily believe them, but I'm going to put them to the test. And I would see that I would facilitate support groups, I would give workshops, and I would say, well, I guess I'm doing something right. And that gave me purpose, because even in my worst day, I said, there's got to be something I can learn from this that I can give back. And that to me was something that was very powerful. I think somebody wants to share something, right, Erica?
Yes, we have Wendy. Go ahead, Wendy. You are on mute.
I'm unmuting.
Oh,
Thank you. And I'll lower my hand now too. What I wanted to share was that I actually sit on a committee that does designations for our peer designation for our state of Colorado. And one of the things that's really interesting that we get an awful lot of times are people who are applying to get our designation. And that shows that they are looking to do the peer support work as part of their recovery so that they consider that to be a key piece of their recovery. And what's really interesting though is that when we're looking for peers and we're looking to accredit them, that's not the piece that we're looking for. We want to make certain that they're super grounded in their recovery first. We want to make certain that they have their recovery connections. We want to make certain that they're involved with groups. We want to make certain that they know all the different avenues for resources. And then if you choose to do peer support group on top of that, or you look at it as a part of your recovery, that's great, but it can't be the basis of your recovery. And we have a lot of people who literally utilize that as a means for which they consider that to be one of the things that they do as their recovery, which is great, but it shouldn't be the only thing that they do. Just throwing that out there.
No, and thank you so much. You have no idea how much I value that. And before we get to a couple of comments that I would love to see, Erica, I'm one of the lead trainers for Puerto Rico, right? When it comes to peer training. And I can completely relate to what you're saying, Wendy, right? Because in my case, it's important for my recovery, but I am not dependent of providing peer support to continue my recovery, which is a very different thing, right? And the same thing can be said with I've given workshops to police officers, to psychologists that more often than not, there is a peer recovery story involved. I remember one time I was listening to this police officer being very discriminatory against a certain population, and I just kept thinking like something happened there. Like you can't just have this much hate. And at one point, I still get goosebumps. The person said, "You know what's really frustrating? My job is to save lives when I can save my own son's. His son died from an overdose." And that is partially the motivation behind the work. But there is a fine line there, right? Because there's such an emotional investment behind putting on an outfit, putting on a badge, and doing work when you get home, but that person's not coming back. You may feel some level of safety, some level of healing, but our heart, we are literally wearing our heart on our sleeve, and that can lead to burnout, right? Because we are dependent on that to make us feel better, and that can be a little bit challenging. So Erica, could you share a couple? Because I know we have someone in
yes,
chat, and
yes.
thank you, everybody.
Before I share these comments, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for opening your heart. And as Juan mentioned, this is a very safe place where we can just share about our emotions. So I really appreciate everyone's comments. Yes, we have, yes, building a stronger recovery in taking on challenges and seeing myself grow, becoming familiar with change and understanding how I navigate fear as I change. I can support people's changes easier when I know what that's like. Thank you, Megan. And the other one is this is part of the problem. Medical providers and states want us to bring our recovery resources as an asset for them to put to use through our work, but do nothing to renew and support or recovery. Hold on. Oops. Or recovery, there is an imbalance. We are like trucks drivers who are expected to haul recover from one place and drop it off in another, but without being supplied by our employers.
And thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm seeing there's a lot of comments about people relating and feeling exhausted. And once again, I can relate because I know what it's like to experience burnout. 2 years ago in that story that I shared, so many times I would sit in my office and honestly, I just cry. I just be like, dude, like I know what I gotta say, because keep in mind, there's this I am the trainer, I am the coordinator. It's like I know what I should be telling myself, but I'm like, you know what, this hurts. But something that I've realized, and I know this is difficult to understand, we're all living through some level of trauma when we work in this field. I've had the privilege of working once again with social workers, psychologists, and so many people that we're kind of on the same boat at different stages, right? But it is an exhausting field. I once heard this in a news article, and as much as it hurt, I'm like, the person said, and I'm paraphrasing because obviously the language was a little bit more traumatizing, so I'm going to soften it up a bit. But basically, is we are supporting a lot of the people that the general community may not necessarily care about. And I thought to myself, like, I'm technically part of that statistic, right? Because I remember when my family at some point said, I mean, if one even makes it through school, I mean, that in itself is a goal. But there was no expectation about what I could achieve. And all the people that I would try to support, and everybody was kind of like, yeah, you do what you can. But at the same time, there is that level of trauma that imagine working and supporting so many people and there's failure after obstacle. We sometimes tend to disassociate ourselves. We tend to back away out of fear. I supported staff that in 1 week, I had one staff member, a peer staff member, shared to me, I've had 10 people that I've supported die from overdose in the past 2 weeks. That's 10 human beings that maybe you've hugged, maybe you've talked about your life, maybe they shared their aspirations and you shared yours, and they are no longer there, and it's Monday because we got to train after, because we got to give a workshop after, we got to put our game face on. It's like, you know what? That's a lot. And we're all in this field of, despite my success or despite my failures, we carry on. And that applies not just to peer staff, that applies to everybody. And that is beautiful within the sadness, because that connects us. When we connect with individuals based on how we're feeling and not what we're going through, I may have maybe I don't relate with anything that any of you have ever experienced, but I can relate to frustration. I can relate to sadness. I can relate to feeling desperate, to feeling alone. And we can connect with that part. And that at least is something beautiful. And we can use that to build new opportunities. And I just want to be thankful once again and directly ask if you feel like you're connecting with the topic, and if in some way this is relatable, right, to a lot of the things that we've been discussing so far. I know we have a couple of comments in chat. I don't know if you want to read some of them.
Sure. So one is from Jessica. Recovery as discovery is my mantra, which means I'm always learning more about myself. And here it is. My peer work became so stressful that I quit in November, and now trying to get disability as I am still experiencing symptoms since November. I have a passion for the field for sure, but I'm exhausted, and that frustrates me. Thank you for sharing.
And thank you so much for sharing all of that and being vulnerable with us, which actually, brings us to another one of the topics as we continue seeing some other people in chat also share their stories, which is, how do we feel? How do you feel? How do I feel about the topics of trust and vulnerability? I think that lengthy word is heavy, right? Because being vulnerable means, okay, I'm here. You can give me your emotions, I can give you mine, but I may not know what's going to be happening. And a lot of us, we come from a past, and I can only speak for myself, of course, but I come from a past where I develop a lot of distrust. I remember when I first became a peer support staff, I would question everything. It didn't matter how simple, how complicated, how straight to the point, how convoluted it was. In my head, I'm like, are you really congratulating me? Or are you saying that because I'm like, I'm one of them peers, right? Like I question everything. And then I realized like, in order to be able to grow, I needed to learn that this is a new chapter of my life. Are there people that have harmed me along the way? Absolutely. Once again, I'm here being real about things that have happened recently, but this happens to so many people. We're talking about peer support, but we can talk about me as a Latino male and my lived experience with that, completely removing anything from a diagnosis and depression and anything else. I can talk about me as a resident of Puerto Rico and all of the things that we've been happening and our identity and are we not? And the same thing can be said about so many people. But you know what? We're here. And while we are here, how can we continue building that trust with people that do see that potential in us growing? And this quote here is taking from a module that we developed, which is being vulnerable allows us to create a space based on mutuality where we can have heart-to-heart conversations where we do establish trust with others. So I want to bring up one simple question, which is, you're at work. Imagine this, right? Let's transport ourselves. We're at work. It's lunch hour. Where do I feel comfortable having lunch? Do I feel comfortable having lunch alongside other people? Are those people fellow peers? It could be the janitor. It could be the psychologist. Or do I maybe feel like I want to go to my car? Do I feel like maybe I want to go and eat inside my office by myself? These little things are important because it's simply to ask, why? There's no positive, there's no negative, simply why, right? I remember one time there was a place that wanted to integrate peer staff that I was providing some consulting for. And whenever that happens, I love to just show up because if you want to build this here, I'm just going to show up. But lunchtime came. And at one point I heard, we're going to get some pizza. And the person that they were interviewing for the role was there. And I'm like, I want to see how this unfolds because a pizza is a very social experience, right? It's like you give a slice. But then I saw an interesting dynamic of all the clinical staff moving the chairs to this one table, but there was one chair that was still on this other table where the peer staff was, the person that was being interviewed, but there was no pizza there. I don't know about you, but I would feel pretty darn uncomfortable if I was that person, right? And I remember I just said out loud, hey, you forgot Fulana's chair. Fulana's like a reference to just like, hey, a person, right? Hey, you forgot Fulana's chair. Let's pull that over here. Let's all have lunch. And you could hear a pin drop because even I'm trying to have lunch. We work for the same people. We're in the same place. I can speak Spanish. You can speak Spanish. Why are you uncomfortable with me? And that's a basic example of sometimes why we determine to have lunch by ourselves and little things like that, right? Any reactions you want to share, Erica?
Sure. So there's one, there are certain professionals that I trust to ask for support in the agency I work for. My boss has lived experience, so he supports me just as I will a peer I'm working with. I feel great that I have people I work with understand the peer role. They have training on it annually, and it is very helpful.
And I just want to say to the person that said how they feel about a possible failure and all that, we're here for you. I think that the biggest misconception, I've had the privilege of having meetings with very high level staff on a national level. And if there's one funny takeaway, it's like, you know what? We're all kind of figuring this out day by day. Like we all do a really great job of looking like we feel we belong or that we feel ready for something. But we're all kind of just figuring it out. And it's okay to feel like maybe I'm not enough because I'm validating my emotions. But the fact that you're taking time to share that with us speaks a lot about you as a professional, because recognizing how I feel lets us know how do we want to feel and how can we work towards that. So I congratulate you, and I know I'm not alone when there's a lot of people that care for you that are in this chat. So moving on to another topic I wanted to discuss here, embracing our cultures, and notice that bold S, embracing our cultures, diversity, and differences. Something else that we've encountered when it comes to integrating peer staff is, in a beautiful sense, we're all different. Our recovery is different, where we come from is different, the color of our skin, what we celebrate, what we don't. But for example, in Puerto Rico, if I've met you for 5 minutes, I will probably hug you by the end of the conversation. Like, we are just very touchy-feely. It's like, hey, how are you? I don't even know who you are. Let's hug, right? We understand not all cultures are like that. I remember the first time I went to a conference and I thought everybody was like that. And you could feel the person going like, with all due respect, who are you and why are you hugging me? And I'm like, right. In many ways, I've unconsciously tried to force my culture and my beliefs and my system onto you. That made me become way more aware of where I am, who am I with, what makes me comfortable can make you feel horribly uncomfortable. And that in itself is beautiful because the context is so different with every person, right? Erica, as an ECPR trainer, I know you connect with a lot of people, and I can only imagine that the diversity in itself, you can give the same training 50 times, and every time it's going to feel like it's a brand new one, right?
Yes, yes. And something that I usually do at the beginning of a training, I always ask if it's okay with the audience to have this connection, if it's okay for me to place a hand over their shoulder. So, I mean, this is a question that I always ask at the beginning, because once we start with the practice, that's something that might happen, that we might give them a hug, we might hold them on their shoulders. So that's something that I always keep in mind.
And yes, we are all Knuff. Yes, I watched the movie, by the way, so I understand the reference. So talking a little bit about all this from a positive mindset, what is something that can happen at work that you're like, you truly respect me because you did this? What is that little thing for you? And I also want to bring it up to you, Erica, as a trainer, as a colleague, what is something that somebody can do or not do that makes you feel like I can trust Juan, I can be vulnerable with Juan because he respected me? What can that be for you?
I feel that for me is if I can trust that person. So the way that the person is talking to me, if that person is respecting me, so then I'm like, oh, I can trust Juan the way that he talks to me, he's respecting me. So that's why I feel that trust is something very important for me.
Absolutely. Wait, we got a couple of responses as well in chat.
So I have, let's see, Jennifer. Oops, hold on. There's a lot of people typing. Honor my time and space. So that's very important. I know someone I can trust by the voice and giving me their time. Thank you. And we have, when it's a choice, people might go beyond what they will be comfortable with doing if not asked. That's lovely, building trust. And culturally, we greet people when we enter a room, but I have learned that my cultural norm of respect doesn't automatically mean disrespect when someone does the opposite. So just keeping that in
Yeah,
mind.
yeah. Then thank you everybody for sharing. For me, it's something so simple, but it lets me know you really care about me, which is it can be very easy to like be at work and just go like, okay, we got a meeting at 9, we got this thing at 10, but how are you? Just that slight pause before we do anything. I call that like a wellness check-in, right? When whoever I'm working with takes a stop and says like, hey, the agenda's there, we got to work. Yeah. How are you doing today? How's your energy? How are you feeling about this? and they sit down with you, right? Because I can ask you like in the hallways, like, Eric, are you doing good? Or I can like sit down. I can put the phone down. And when they have that eye contact, it's very intentional that they genuinely want to know how I'm doing. And sometimes that's caught me off guard. Because like usually what will we say? It's like, oh, I'm doing good. But when they sit down and they look at me and they do this, I'm like, oh man, okay, I'm gonna be real. It's like real talk, I'm not doing too great today. But I'm here, right? But I may need some support with this and that. And that lets me know I can trust you because you did that with me, and then I'll do that with you. And that creates that safe space that we've been talking about. And this doesn't just have to be for pure staff. Some of the people that I feel most comfortable sharing how I feel at work today are clinical providers, are social workers that I've engaged with. But because we built that rapport, and because thankfully, even though I am technically peer staff, I think us in the community can understand. They know I have a name. I'm not just a role, right? I'm not this peer that they hired because of lived experience. I am Juan, I am a professional, and I'm hired because I have these abilities. And that lets me know I'm not a token for you. I am your coworker. And that means I can open up to you. And I see some things in chat where people can agree just having that time and valuing that time with your coworker is essential. So something that we talk about in ECPR, because I know we've had a couple of people in chat ask us about it, but it also applies to this topic, is we wear many hats in life. You can freely, even in chat, ask yourselves or ask yourself, how many hats do I wear? I am a peer provider. I am a parent. I am a neighbor. I am part of the social club. I belong to this panel. And every place has a level of expectation about me, right? What is Juan's role here, there? But I'm still the same person. And sometimes that can be overwhelming, because if you ask me how I'm feeling, it's like, are you asking me as peer staff? Or are you asking me as Juan? Or are you asking me as your coworker? Like, are you asking me because of my birthday? It's like, oh, okay, what's your angle? It's like, no, just how are you, right? But taking that hat off can sometimes be so incredibly difficult because we got work to do. So aside from your role as a peer, what other hats would you say you have in your life? And which hats do you love to wear? Or which hats would you like to wear more? One hat that I've admittedly been pretty awful at is be a better friend. I am thankful to have a great social circle, but for many years it was work first, second, because I was so afraid of like, what if this ends? And then eventually I said to myself, like, what is it worth it if you got money, but nobody wants to go out to eat with you? Or you want to celebrate something, but there's nobody to celebrate it with. So I said, you know what? When Friday comes around, that work hat, I'm gonna lightly put it on. So as soon as I'm off work, it's like, hey, Erica, let's go eat. Because I value that coffee break with an individual is so important. What about you, Erica? Aside from a trainer, aside from the person that people see you online, who really is Erica? We're gonna turn this around. Who are you?
So I'm a mom, a sister, a daughter, and oh my gosh, I have so many titles, and I feel that I'm very involved with the community. So I belong to multiple coalitions here locally, and that's who I am.
And thank you so much for sharing that. And we see people that are moms, they're grandmothers. And if there's something that helped me, if there's one takeaway that I hope anybody takes today from, this dialogue that we can absolutely continue in a future session, is let people know we are far more than just our recovery. Because something we often hear that peer staff is just like any other professional, right? And they say it with a positive mindset, the implication being we're all professionals. But there's always one big difference, which is a psychologist can be a person with lived experience, can absolutely be, but the job description, the job title specifically, you don't know. But when you're a peer specialist, when you're a recovery support specialist, when you're a peer facilitator, the job title in itself can let you know. I think Juan went through something. I'm not sure what, but you're one of them people with lived experience, right? So something that helped me is, yeah, but I also like to produce films. Yeah, but I also like to cook. I can talk about that. And people were able to see that people with lived experience, people in recovery, that's just like one of like 80 hats that we have. We can talk about all these other ones. And we begin to normalize some of these different answers. And thank you so much for being here. And as we have the question here, can we see how many hats other people are wearing? Let's think about some of the people that maybe have been a little bit hurtful and harmful towards us. I've had people say very damaging things to me in the past that have caused tears, have caused me to question who I am and what I do. And the more that I learned about their life, I'm like, we're actually not that different. I saw you as the problem. You are the opposite thing. That person is fighting to survive. They feel like that little corner that I have there, they are in that corner and they're in fight or flight mode. But we don't know it at first because we don't see those hats. And that can be a tough pill to swallow, right? When the person that I think is the villain of the movie can be both the villain, but also the victim. And they're doing all of these things literally to try to survive. And I know it may be an interesting topic to bring up, but I say this because if we see the problems as me and you over there, there's no connection because we're waiting for one side to concede, right? Where it's either like you apologize or I apologize. It's like, you know what? What if we both kind of got to figure something out differently? And that's something I always like to just, put over the table. And then the other thing, as I see some people like gardening and all of these other wonderful things, is what would you like other people to learn about you and vice versa? I was horrible, admittedly horrible at first. And just learning, like, what do my coworkers do outside their job? Because for so long, I don't know if it happened to all of you, but more often than not, because I was the only peer staff, for so long, it became about like, Juan, how did you overcome this? How did you overcome that? It got to a point I'm like, I can't be the only one in this place that has gone through something. And then you learn about the clinical provider that it's also overcome something, and the janitor that also overcame something, and the bus driver. You're like, you know what? Once again, we're all figuring this out. We're all going through stuff. We all feel happy. We all feel miserable every now and then. But just recognizing all of those hats let us know, like, you got a coat hanger, I got a coat hanger. You know what? Let's share some of these hats. What are some of the responses that we have so far about the different hats people have?
Yeah, so we have a daughter and a dad to 3 cats, one of which who is naked. I'm a husband, I'm a gender fluid person, a part of LGBTQ plus. I am a person who plays board games, tabletop role play games, and video games. So we have a lot of descriptions. Let's see what else. I like to dance, exercise.
I'm a gamer too, just in case. I literally have my controllers in front of me.
There you go, another gamer. A gardener, grandma, mother, neighbor, co-worker, friend, classmate. I like having the grandma hat. Thank you for sharing. And that's pretty much.
And I think that last comment there, we are all humans with somewhat trauma. I think the best example I can provide, in Puerto Rico, we had Hurricane Maria. And for those who don't know, that happened in 2017. And many people like myself, I didn't have power or water for 6 months. It feels wild to say out loud, but for 6 months, I did not have either one of those. So I slept in the balcony of my home, figuring out how to get ice, how to get water, how to get clean water to take a bath, and I was fully employed. And there's something beautiful that happened around that, that I kind of feel, I was like, if I know this is kind of messed up right now, but if we can have something lasting here, it's like when things like that happen, nobody cares how much money you have. Nobody cares what your job title is. Everybody in that line, you have people that have like the most expensive cars to those that didn't even have cars. And we're all like, can we get some warm food? Because we could just go for some warm food. We have people out here literally pull carts apart and the batteries just to have like a large light so we would prevent some theft. And all the neighbors would gather around. And it's like, I don't care who you are. Whatever you need, I got you. And that let us know at the end of the day, we're all on the same boat. You can have the cheapest car, you can have the most expensive car. They all got four wheels. I know some vehicles don't have only four tires. Okay, people, it's a hypothetical example. But we have people that didn't even have power for 1 year, over 1 year. How do you survive? You connect. You interact with those that you trust. That's when you figure out, where am I? What is my sense of belonging here, right? And all of these things are simply beautiful to remember and embrace. Oh, could you read that last comment from Megan?
Yes. One of the first instances I remember of feeling hope was a radio story about a community's response after a natural disaster.
Absolutely. And I see other chats about the things that happened in Puerto Rico, and the trauma was real. You know, the trauma was real about all of the things that had happened. We always heard about a resilient community. It's like, I don't want to be resilient. I want food. I want water. I want electricity. You know, I want the basic things that most people, you have no idea how much you miss Netflix until the TV doesn't even turn on. I think it's the best way we can put it. But hey, guess what? We're here. You become stronger. You grow when these events happen. So, you know, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, which is, what are some of those favorite hobbies and activities, and how can we integrate that within the environment that we work in? One of my current roles in Puerto Rico currently is not just I do the interview process for peer staff, but also I also engage with clinical providers that are going to have peer staff to make sure that they do have inclusive language, that they are non-discriminatory. And one of the most powerful things that I've seen be helpful, and this is something that we can practice everywhere, is we got to stop obsessing about our work and remember what we look to promote in our work. What is it that we look to promote in peer work? Wellness activities, wellness plans, daily habits, all these positive things. Yet for some reason, we see it as I help you do that. But what about the work environment? We can have a Wellness Friday, we can have a Wellness Wednesday, we can have a Taco Tuesday, we can have all these things that initially some people will say, what does that have to do with my work? You know what the response is? Everything. Literally everything. Because we live in an exhausting society. And if I feel like I can have a casual Friday and we can all come in with some silly clothing and all that, and I feel like I had a great time, I don't know about you, but that's a work environment I kind of want to be at for long term, right? Because it lets me know, yeah, you have a job, but you're also a human being. You also laugh. You also like a comedy movie every now and then. So I invite everybody to explore how, with just like a small percentage, we can integrate some of these things that I see as like this controller right now, right? I may see that as a me on a personal level, but if there's ways that we can integrate that, we learn from each other. I would do a lot of workshops regarding art and wellness activities at work and music, and we would bring some food and all of that. And I know that work outings are not for everybody, right? I'm seeing some answers. Like, I'll be honest, like I was the first one that I would, as a coordinator, I would have lunch in my car. So it's like, just think about that, right? I am the leading person and I would have lunch in the car. But eventually I also did have to learn. It's like, do what you promote in my case, right? I'm the person that's training people to engage in social activities and having this sense of belonging, but I'm in the car. And it's because I realized for me, I was focused so much on teaching and not really sharing who I was, who I am. I seek that you embrace who you are in your work environment, but I'm like, I'm not doing that. Actually, aside from my role, do people really kind of know who I am? And once I began intentionally changing that habit, I began to feel like I feel like I can say this really crappy joke that only my wife laughs only because she's legally bound to me and I'm bound to her, and she'll kind of laugh and like, oh, they did the same laugh. Okay, okay, hey, we're on the same page now, right? And it's that sense of connection that unites us a lot in these different events. Now, going back, why is it important that we talk about all this when it comes to day one, when it comes to working as a peer? Why would you all say that it is important to understand how maybe I don't like to socially engage a lot at my work, but two people do? Does that mean that I have to change who I am? No. But why is it important that I am aware of all of that? When we talk about boundaries, with Erica and me talking about how we tend to greet people and all of that, why is all of this important? Why would you say, Erica, is it important for you to embrace and understand and learn about other people's culture and differences in the workplace?
Like for me, I feel that it's very important because I have seen that this is, I mean, that who I am, like 100% comes from my culture, and I have to be aware that my culture is different and that every person has a different culture. The way that we greet to each other, the way that we talk, if we look at the eyes, even like by doing eye contact, in my culture it's like you cannot look to someone to the eyes because that's not respectful. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I have been able to acculturate myself in this culture as well. So I feel that the more that we know ourselves, the better that we will be able to communicate and to be aware of the difference of cultures with the our coworkers or with the community that we work with. So the more that we know our own culture, we're going to be more open to learn about the difference of culture.
Absolutely. And I see, and thank you for sharing that. And I see one person in chat talking about how their organization actually post-COVID paid their staff to participate in some wellness support groups. Something that we began doing in Puerto Rico. We experienced a lot of staff burnout post-COVID. There will be a lot more arguments, and it's because everybody's coming back from their home, right? It's like we all changed as human beings. New staff was hired, old staff went out. It's like all of this. And about 6 months ago, we began implementing monthly wellness workshops. And every 2 weeks, we do a more intentional check-in, which is not just like a hallway conversation. It's like we pick back up previous conversations. On Fridays, we take a stop. We wear more casual clothing, and we focus on things that are fun, that are team building, that are not focused on, this is going to be another practice that you got to do at work. It's like, no, this is for you. This is for you. And immediately we began to see the difference because we stopped obsessing over, we have this calendar that we have to commit to. And the shift changed to, I want to make sure I can do that to the best of my abilities and that I like where I'm at and that I like where I'm working, right? So those are things that can be really, really helpful. And something that I want to share very briefly, because this is in itself its own training, is a little bit more about ECPR, because it has a lot to do with this specific conversation that we're having. And because we're a little short on time, I'll make sure to be brief. But once again, Upon the closure of today's session, we are going to share some contact information. So if there's anything you want us to reach back, to and everything, you can let us know. But emotional CPR is basically a heart-to-heart conversation that we have to have a judgment-free discussion about ourselves, of where we are, where we want to be, how we feel when we wear all of those hats. And it talks about emotional resuscitation, because sometimes we feel down. Sometimes we feel like we're ready to tap out. So how do we revitalize ourselves through having all of that? And I see even in chat, some people are doing monthly board games and tabletop role-playing games at work. That would be awesome. I'd sign up, because it makes you feel awesome. Years ago, I would call in sick. I would say I'm not feeling well. But as time goes by, I learned it's not just about what works for Juan. I realized that because I'm part of a work environment, that integration, that inclusion also means if you respect my culture, I kind of got to give some of that love back as well, right? And with WeCPR, through WeCPR, what we want is to enter a neutral place and respect those differences. More often than not, because I'm Latino, whenever I would travel, people will think by default, I like rice and beans and I'm a good dancer. It's like no, I like rice and beans, but if you want to see a bad dancer, you come over to anything that I do like that, and you will give the worst review ever. Because we begin to generalize, because you assume things that because I'm from Puerto Rico, I have to like these things. It's like, no, you can respect who I am based on what I'm sharing, based on the conversations that we've been having, but you don't jump to those conclusions. You leave those hats and you suspend those beliefs. Oh, I heard these people. I remember whenever I would have a taxi driver, when I would travel to a conference, if I said I'm from Puerto Rico, usually the conversation was about how crazy Puerto Ricans were. And I'm like, you do realize I am Puerto Rican, right? So I do have the right to feel kind of offended by this. But that's just what they thought I wanted to talk about, which I'm not sure why. I'm just going to say that, right? So the three phases of ECPR, the first one, we connect. We have a genuine heart-to-heart conversation. It's not about it sounding cute. It's not about it sounding lovely. It's being intentional that if I'm engaging in a passionate, deep conversation with you, from the environment to the time to the distractions that I may or may not have, the focus is on these two people right here. We also want to empower people, to make sure that it's not me motivating or me empowering you. It's finding that empowerment from within to figuring out that purpose. Because a lot of times when we don't feel like we are revitalized, when we don't feel like we have this energy, it's because we sort of lost that purpose along the way. What makes me wake up? When I go to bed, do I feel excited about the next day, or do I feel like, oh, okay, let's be careful about all that, right? And revitalize is creating that new life. A lot of people in chat, and I think this deep conversation that I've loved that we've been having is, at some point, I sat down with one of my mentors a month ago, because I'm still figuring out some changes, right? I'm not going to lie. I probably still see my psychologist. I see her tomorrow morning, as a matter of fact. I am not a perfect human being. I'm going through stuff in my life. And something that my mentor that I respect so much, she told me a month ago is, Juan, I think part of your current challenge is you want new challenges, not different challenges. You've been trying to figure out some similar things, and that doesn't fulfill you anymore because you've grown. You've changed as a human being. Therefore, your goals are going to change. What excited you a couple of years ago, you may not feel anything about that anymore, and that's okay, because we as human beings grow. And hearing that made me go, I've been thinking about A and B when there's C, D, E, F, G, and the rest of the alphabet that can maybe help inspire me in that process. And then I wanted to quickly ask this as well, as Erica would love, maybe if we have a couple of reactions before we switch to the Q&A. is how comfortable are we celebrating key moments of our lives, from a work anniversary, a life anniversary, I got a promotion, or I graduated. I know if I can speak for myself, I still struggle with this. I'm the person that I can reach a milestone and admittedly I'll be like, cool, can we keep going? And I'll have people tell me like, why you should celebrate. It's like, no, I'm happy. And part of me is like, okay, usually people will be crying out of joy and you're kind of like, so I'm still figuring this out. But that's why I wanted to ask all of you. As Eric, I don't know if there's any comments or reactions before we begin to conclude and switch to the Q&A.
Okay, so there's one comment. I struggle with birthdays, better about other achievements.
And thank you for sharing that. And I ask this because when we work in a professional environment, we have people that celebrate many different things. For me, celebrating a birthday was a trigger. Like I would always be absent. It got to the point where at my work, they would anticipate and celebrate my birthday a week before it actually happened. It got to that point because they saw my work agenda and they would see how like as my birthday came closer, I would give these trainings that are like really far away. And they're like, hey, we know what you're trying to do, Juan. But I realized like my birthday is not just about me. These people care so much about me. Think of the way my mindset changed. It went from, dude, that is insulting that you're imposing this on me, to these people went out of their way to celebrate my birthday a week in advance, looked at my agenda, figured out what I was doing, and then adjusted accordingly. And they went to the training that I was giving, which was an hour away. I'm like, real talk? I don't know if I would do that for them. So I felt kind of bad, but then I realized I feel like I belong. I feel like what I saw as a problem back in the day is actually kind of the solution. It's changing the mindset and embracing some of those differences. And as we conclude here, I just wanted to briefly mention this final topic, which we can talk about more detail as through the modules and everything, which is receiving feedback and supervision. As people that maybe we've overcome trauma or are still managing trauma, receiving criticism, receiving feedback of any kind, even if positive, can often be challenging. But when we work on these wellness activities at work, when we build the trust, when we feel like we can be vulnerable with somebody, when we have that coworker that's like, okay, Erica's my person, like I can speak to her openly about this, all of a sudden I'm able to put those walls down. And I know it's not easy. And sometimes people can mean harm towards themselves. So this is not like a one-trick pony. This is not, we're saving the world. But this can also help the other side. Like the more that we can have casual conversations where we see the human being, and now that you're my boss, because like being my boss has it's not a level playing field. You have power over me, right? And those little things allow me to say, like, I got a job. Guess what? You got to do your job. And your job involves me doing my job. And all of a sudden, I don't see you as my boss. I see you as somebody having a different responsibility than that one that I have. And because we're a little short on time, I'm just going to carry the forum over to Erica for any possible questions. So if you have questions, if you have curiosities about all of this, or if you feel like this has been a healthy, healing discussion where we feel comfortable, now's the time, people.
So I don't have any specific questions, but if you have any specific questions, you can add them to the chat. I want to share what Megan shared. She said, self-aware judgment is different than making an assumption. It feels good to hear someone admit that they make an assumption and ask for clarity. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. And it is absolutely true. It's like when it comes to assumptions, generalization, stereotypes, a lot of these we kind of treat them similar, but the deeper we go, we realize there's so many differences, right? Just like I'm Latino, my main language is in Spanish. So people may feel like they see me and they have to switch to Spanish. It's like, if I'm talking to you and I feel comfortable like this, I'm okay. I've had other people that are completely fluent in English, but emotionally, they feel more comfortable talking in Spanish. But if I assume because your English is so eloquent, I would discard that. It's like, ask the person, explore with the person, connect with what they genuinely want, and ask intentional questions, but also give intentional responses in the process.
So we have great comments. This has made me feel vulnerable, and that is okay. Let's see. So we have a comment from Scott. I would like to hear more about the range of work environments and program purposes that peers are in. The goals of organizations shape their culture, power relationships, and roles. If this spectrum isn't discussed, it can obscure the experiences that peer workers have in specific kinds of workplaces.
And thank you so much for that, Scott. Sharing a couple of quick examples from Puerto Rico. Because of my consulting work through the government, I also work with liaisons, colleagues, like I'm also providing some consulting for hospitals that are integrating peer support services. Every environment is completely different, right? And a lot of these are predominantly clinical based. So more often than not, I'll usually get a call saying, hey, we got federal funding or private funding to hire peer staff. Let's go train people and hire, right? They'll usually just skip the line to give me the person's name. But then they realize there's so much within all of that, right? Because then I'll start asking, how long has your organization existed? And you say 20 years. I'm like, that's 20 years of working like this. Then all of a sudden, you include a staff member that is going to be seen as an outsider, but that culturally that person is going to come with some differences because they do come with a lived experience, which in itself brings up another question of, is the language that even in a meeting that you're having, is it inclusionary? Is it exclusionary? Are you able to see that person as a coworker when at one point maybe you were their clinical service provider, right? And that goes back to the intention of what does the organization want to have? Is it to fulfill a job position because they got a grant opportunity, or is it a systemic change? Like I've seen many people have peer staff hired, and part of the role, and I love this, their role is actually advising clinical providers and decision makers to make sure that language, even from trainings, is more inclusive. That's not tied to even direct services, but as a person with lived experience, you're actually saying, hey, that title for that training, that's kind of discriminatory. That's like very stigmatizing towards that. You know, we would have these lengthy titles, and I'm like, if somebody had to talk about like patient management as opposed to like supporting an individual, right? Those little changes, but the buy-in has to come not from the peer staff. It has to come from the willingness of the organization that wants to evoke that change.
I think we have either a comment or a question, one from Scott. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, the history of this whole peer movement was originally, it was all peer run. There were funds that came for these projects. And so I guess it's just like I want to remember that there still are peer initiatives that are run by peers. And there have even been businesses that have been not about clinical delivery of services, but about just doing things together. And that's what I mean by that range and spectrum, where the government, both in the US and also in where I live in Ontario, seems to want to turn everything back into a kind of clinical service model. And so I just wanted to lift up this possibility that there are other ways to think about these power relationships. And but I really appreciate what you're bringing up.
No, and thank you so much for mentioning that because it is completely true, right? when you think about from Judy Chamberlain to the whole story of the peer movement, it has to do with like public policy, justice, systems change from oppression, the origin of peer service. I was literally talking about this with clinical providers yesterday, that sometimes the story gets lost along the way, right? Right now, there's a story that peer services rose to empower people. And it's like, yes, but that is a very short answer of it, right? The lengthier answer involves a lot of things about people not having freedom, not having a sense of liberty, not having a sense of decision making. And there are all levels of organizations. Not every place is in a clinical setting. Even my work currently within the Puerto Rico government, even though it's government run, it has a peer-led program. So there's ongoing challenges of how do you grow the scope while being peer run, but you're within this structure, right? And that is literally a daily, like as early as yesterday afternoon, where I have to constantly remind ourselves, like, let's not forget where this comes from and what is the purpose. It's not just fulfilling a role. It's not just writing a grant proposal. Is that sometimes we will say things that we will not agree on because I'm not advocating for myself. It's not that I thankfully have a job and I gotta stay quiet and I need to make sure I get paid. It's that I'm at the end of the day an advocate for a movement of one of my former supervisors sadly is no longer with us because of so much discrimination. The person made a choice against her own life. I have the privilege to still be here. And I have to be mindful that I have the privilege to have this chair. How many people don't? And if I ever become cozy and saying, well, I'm here, I work my tail, for every one of us, how many members in the community do not have the opportunities that we have? But how do you balance that, right? But it's having these conversations and not being afraid to say, you know what, this power, I have it today. I don't need it for the rest of my life. We need more people to have an education and sharing history of peer work because it often does get lost. You know, we have a lot of people in the community that I learned from, you know, through the alternatives conferences and so many places, but the large majority of the community, and I say that like from a society perspective, they don't know a lot of our origin story. So it's part of our responsibility, right? So it's kind of like embedded to like let people know, hey, this happened, but it's not easy. And it can just as easily be taken away, right? I remember also having a lot of conversations with a lot of individuals that would have this problem of what if my next boss doesn't care about peer support services? And getting this person ready to, it's like, if you believe in what you do, talk about it. Don't be afraid about it. But it's not up to you, right? It is an ongoing conversation, and not to get too cozy and saying, well, we're here, you know, like we're not going back. Even as individuals, even as people in recovery, even as human beings, like I can lose weight. That doesn't mean it can't come back. I can overcome my depression. That doesn't mean it can't come back, right? I overcame my anxiety. I still get anxiety attacks. And I was diagnosed when I was 9, right? Are they less than before? Yes. Do I still need to take care of myself? Do I have my wellness plan? Absolutely. We're all human beings trying to figure this out.
Thank you, Juan. I don't see any more questions or comments. And I just want to say thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, Juan, for making this webinar very interactive. We learn from each other. And this webinar is going to be posted in our webpage. If you have any additional questions, you can always send us an email. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this webinar, we're going to have this webinar in Spanish. It's going to be on March 4th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Thank you, Juan. And we have great comments, great presentation. People really enjoy the webinar. Thank you. Thank you, Juan and Erica.
No, thank you everybody for your time and your willingness to share. Without you, this is just a presentation and 2 people talking, right? All of you brought this to life. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.